Okay, so today is BA the 30th. If you don't know what BA is, that's Black August. I'm winding down another year of Black August. What I'm going to do today is I'm going to give you a couple questions that are relevant to this podcast right here, 10K Thunder and Black Shield. I should have done this in the first video, but I did not do that. So I'll do it today, and I got a little time. And you have to listen to these questions right here because these questions are very, very tricky. They're kind of like trick questions. I mean, I know the answers to all of them, but maybe some of you may or may not know. Okay, but when you answer these questions and when you attempt to analyze these questions, think about two words: cultural revolution. And if you don't know what a cultural revolution is, then maybe you should go back and study what happened over in China during the Cultural Revolution of the Mao Zedong. I mean, there are a lot of nations that underwent cultural revolutions. Okay, so the first question is development of an ideo-political philosophy for decolonization. Remember the two words, cultural revolution. Second question is the concept of the African American. Is this concept rooted within the colonized framework of white supremacy and domination? Or was it, and when I say was it, I mean the concept of the African American developed as an antithesis to the colonial system? Third question, political, socio-economic abdication of responsibility. Who's at fault? So I'm gonna give you a little bit more information about that question right there. Okay, so if you have a population of people who have been oppressed in any society or lived up under the domination of systems and laws that they don't control, it's incumbent upon those people to rally together and develop, political ideas and concepts that represent their political and social class. So if you don't do that, who's at fault? Okay, so I only know three classes. I know the ruling class, and this is in any society. We have the ruling class, we have the middle class, and then we have what they call the underclass. And the underclass are the poor people in any society. And within each of those classes, there are different layers up inside those classes. So let me read that question again. Political, socio-economic abdication of responsibility. Who's at fault? Now, when you answer that question, remember the three classes that I mentioned. Who's at fault? Okay, so the fourth question is this here. In the 2024 presidential race, why are so many African Americans abandoning the Democratic Party and now they're switching over to the Republican Party without studying the history of the parties themselves or the candidate? Fifth question. A people subjected to centuries of colonization and eventual self-denial, can they really deem themselves free men, even if they have not undergone the negation of the negation process? Now, go back to the two words that I say you need to remember: cultural revolution. Now let's look at negation of the negation. So I'm going to explain a little bit about negation of the negation. Let's say you have a person that want to lose weight. They say, okay, I'm going to want to lose weight, right? So they start off at a certain size, and then they start going to the gym. They start eating right. They change their mental state of mind and all that kind of stuff, right? At the end of whatever they're trying to achieve, they negated what they were originally were, and now they developed into something else. That's as simplistic as I can give it right now because I am inside the car dealership, so I just want to read these questions like kind of quickly. All right? Okay. The American institution of slavery, as we know it, was the direct colonization of Africans to European rule. The direct colonization. of European rule? In what year was the transition made from direct colonial rule of Africans in the U.S. to indirect rule? That's a trick question right there. I'm gonna read it again for you because I want you to get this right. The American institution of slavery, as we know it, was the direct colonization of Africans to European rule. In what year was the transition made from direct colonial rule of Africans in the U.S. to indirect rule? That's a trick question. I'm just going to let you know. Okay. Indirect colonial rule is known as what? Remember, over here on this podcast, we're trying to develop critical thinkers. It's not like every other podcast out there. We looking at, we got to be like the Chinese. We got to be thinking like 100 years down the line, right? So, in order to do that, it's incumbent upon each and every one of us to learn as much information as possible, and we'll get to that. Okay, so now let's look at existential threats. That word should, that term right there should be familiar to us all. I mean, right now we're going into the third year of World War III. We're going into the third year of World War III. And out of Russia, they keep mentioning existential threats. One of the primary reasons why they went into Ukraine is because they said that Ukraine wanted to join NATO, represented an existential threat, a red line. Okay, so in Black America, we have to start thinking in terms of existential threats. And an existential threat simply means a threat to your very existence. Everything. An existential threat can literally destroy you. Okay. So the question is, existential threats to the cultural adhesion, development, and propagation of the development of a sovereign cultural identity / institutions. Below are but a few examples of existential threats that may or may not have an adverse effect on the development of Black culture. Choose which contradiction is the most dangerous. So I'm going to give you 5 questions that you have to choose from. I'm going to let you decide which one represents the most critical existential threat. Okay, so number 1, white supremacy or racism. 2, police brutality. 3, economic underdevelopment. 4, hip-hop culture. 5, Black female domination of political and social affairs in the community. So you guys have to decide which one is the biggest threat to the existence of Black people in this country. I mean, you can pick them all. You can pick 1 or 2, but in your understanding, you have to decide which one represents a clear and present danger. To me, I say them all, but there's one in particular that represents the biggest threat of all, especially when we're talking about influencing ideas, influences that are so dangerous that they are literally directing the direction of the Black community. I can tell you right now, emphatically, it's not police brutality. It's not white supremacy, but I'll let you decide that. When we first started this podcast right here, again, we said that we wanted to develop critical thinkers amongst Black men, particularly the younger Black men. And yesterday in the video, it might have came off as a little harsh, but some of these questions right here should give us clarity as to what we're attempting to do in the long haul. I wrote some more notes down. I don't know. I didn't bring those notes, but I'll make another video today, and I'm going to get to some very critical notes that I took up out of Ratchet of the Earth. This is Frantz Fanon right here, and we talked about Frantz Fanon yesterday, who was a Martinican, and back in the 60s he went over in Algeria, and he joined the Algerian liberation movement, fighting against the British and the colonial authorities over in Algeria. When I come back later on, I'm going to give you some information that I ran across yesterday that came up out of Nigeria. I'm not even from Nigeria. I'm so embarrassed for the Nigerian government. I mean, this is going to be unbelievable, and it has to do with France and the seizure of the presidential plane that landed in France. They seized the presidential plane of the president of Nigeria, seized it, and said that the Nigerian government owes them money. I mean, can you imagine if Air Force One landed in another country and they seized Air Force One, the presidential plane from the United States, seized the plane? I mean, how can this happen? But anyway, we'll get back to more of the topic. But these questions right here, some of them are trick questions. I think they're good questions. I wrote them, and I want you guys to give me some feedback on these questions right here. This is how you develop critical thinkers. I mean, like I say over on this podcast, there's no plan. You know, every now and then we can joke around about, you know, what's going on in Black America. You know, we can joke every now and then, but, you know, the focal point of this station is critical thinking. So hit that like and subscribe button.